Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is the Audio-Technica ATH-WP900, a $650 dynamic driver closed-back headphone. This was a loan to me from Audio-Technica. They have asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation. And I'm an affiliate link partner with Amazon, who has this for sale, currently on sale for $600 as of the filming of this video. So I will put an affiliate link to that down in the description below too. If you like what I say about this product and are considering buying it, please consider using that affiliate link. I'll get a small kickback, and I only use affiliate link money to keep the channel running. All right, I ended up liking this quite a bit. It's probably my favorite closed back under $1,000 in MSRP right now, at least of the ones that I have heard. So stick around after shameless self-promotion to find out why.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style, and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
Audio-Technica has really marketed the WP900 here as kind of an on-the-go portable use headphone. Everything from its somewhat small form factor to how it collapses like this in the carrying pouch and the ease of drive. It's a very easy headphone to drive. And even the cabling they put in the stock packaging here kind of lends itself in that direction. And so I will kind of filter this review through that lens in terms of like, is this a good closed back headphone, and is it good for on-the-go usage? And as a spoiler, I think, yeah, it's pretty good in either case. So the specs on this thing, real quick, it has a 53mm dynamic driver in it. The rated impedance is 38 ohms with a 100 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity. So that is fairly easy to drive in there, which comes back to like the on-the-go friendly nature of it. I'm going to show you an overhead view here in just a moment about close-up of the build, and we'll talk about the cabling and all of that comes with it. And as well as some of the accessories in the packaging. I have already filmed that video, and I want to clear up one thing. I think in this clip coming up, I say that the mass of this thing is 293 grams. That's not right. It's 243 grams. It is a pretty light headphone. So keep that in mind as we cut to this other clip. So let me show you a close-up of the build here right now. Up close look at the build, and those wooden cups are pretty. Right, that is one of the things that stands out. Also highly reflective. You can see my light reflecting pretty clearly there. Cover it up for a second. You can like just see the reflection of my hand passing over the light and so forth. So I mean, it's very well polished, very shiny, fairly reflective there. It's a very striking look here. The housing around the driver is maple, and then this finish that you see is a very thin layer of flame maple that is done in Japan. Like all of Audio-Technica's wooden headphones are handmade in Japan, in Tokyo specifically, according to their website. Okay, and I mean they look great. All that with the Audio-Technica logo in there and so forth. So really well done on those cups. That just looks beautiful. Headband. Single bar, a little bit of padding here, but it doesn't need very much because it's a very light headphone. I think it's about 293 grams, something like that, of mass according to the website. I'd have to look up that number, but it's under 300, which is fairly impressive. Okay, so again, yeah, very light. And the pads are not particularly deep, but they are nice and soft. Okay, and you see there's the 53mm dynamic driver down in there. And like there's a fair amount of room for your ear here. If you have average size ears, you're probably going to be completely enclosed. But I think a lot of people are going to feel just a slight amount of pressure either at the top or the bottom of their earlobe, okay, on there in terms of fit. Because it's not the biggest headphone out there in terms of like the size of the cup or anything like that. Okay. Cabling. We have the proprietary A2DC connectors which are a modified form of MMCX, I think. Here from Audio Technica. It is a detachable cable, but they have those proprietary connectors on them. So on to the subject of the cable, here's one of them. The stock package ships with 2 cables. They are identical except for the amp end termination. They send you a 4.4 millimeter Pentacon with the 90-degree angle connector there, and then you also get a 3.5 millimeter single-ended connector there as well. I mean, everything about this headphone is geared toward it being like a mobile on-the-go use headphone, hence the right angle connector and, you know, just a very small weight on that too. So here we see the wire end of the A2DC connectors there. This cable is not the worst stock cable I have ever used, also far from the best. It's got a little bit of springiness to it, okay? It does kind of want to unwind on itself. It has, yeah, a bit of a tendency to do stuff like that when you pick it up, although it's not huge on the tangling thing. So you see how it kind of like looped around on itself, but it didn't really tangle there. I found that to be rather common. Also, I did, and I know this is going to be the controversial part, but it's what my ears just keep very consistently hearing. There's a little bit of excess treble harshness to the sound when using the stock cable through this headphone. But moving to a slightly higher quality aftermarket cable helps smooth that out a little bit. More on that in the sound section. So I think you probably are going to want to buy an aftermarket cable for this headphone, if not for sonic reasons, really just for straight ergonomic reasons as well. The other accessory of note that comes in the package is this carrying pouch slash bag here, which is fairly simple. Stuff goes in there, and then you have this strap here, which just fits over top of this like that. It's not the most protective thing in the world, but these headphones are pretty tough. I mean, the main thing you want to do is keep this from scratching. Okay, but once you do that, like, they're fairly durable, even for their low weight. Like, there's a quality of build here. They feel fairly well put together, and so forth. All right, I think that's good for the up close of the build. Let's go back to me on camera, talking about other things. All right, let's talk briefly about fit, comfort, and isolation here. I think it fits pretty well on my head. Now, I have like fairly average-ish size earlobes here, and for the most part, these sort of small-ish ear openings on the cup here enclose most of my ear. I do feel just a little pressure here at the bottom of the earlobe. Not really anything that bothers me. Now, again, the overall cup size of this headphone here is just a little bit on the smaller side for like for what would be considered a full-size headphone. And again, it is compact. That does help keep the weight down. Again, like the mass of 243 grams, very light. I do feel a little bit of added, like a lot of the weight is carried right here on the top of the head here from the headband, but just because of how light the headphone is overall, I really never had any hot spotting issues because of that. Now, the seal is okay. Like here with it on my head, I still hear my voice fairly easily, not just traveling through the mass of my own head, but just in the air around me. And if I like snap my fingers around here, I still hear them fairly well. So it is not the most isolating headphone in terms of keeping ambient sounds or outside sounds out. Okay, so I think you either are going to want to use this in a headphone or in an area where you do want to hear what's going on around you, or is just still a relatively quiet area to use it in. Now, as far as keeping sound in, I have not been able to hear its effectiveness on that because when it's been playing, it's always been on my head. All right, so what I'm going to do here is down in the description, I'm going to put a link to a video where I put it on my head and play some music and then just let a room microphone like pick up what the ambient sounds are, and I'll get a couple of my other close backs out for comparison on the same test. I'm going to have to do that as a separate video clip. I'll keep it unlisted that you will link from the description of this video just because I'm going to play actual music on it, so I'll have to demonetize and all that stuff. But check the link down below for a sound isolation test, at least in terms, a sound leak test would be a better word, at least in terms of keeping the sound in. Okay. But other than that, like, I did not have any long-term comfort issues with this headphone. I didn't really get sweaty ears or anything like that with it either. It's fairly comfortable on my head. It's very light. The weight is distributed well enough. The low weight is distributed well enough. I didn't have any hot spotting issues or anything like that. So I think it's well done in that regard. And then again, like as an on-the-go headphone, it's fairly effective just because it is small-ish and it is light and so forth. And like I was able to very easily drive it off of the iBasso DX180 DAP. Right there, and so you can drive it from portable devices pretty easily and all that. So I think it is effective as an on-the-go piece as well. However, these cups are flashy, so you might want to give thought as to like where you're going to be using them and how much attention you want to draw to yourself, because yeah, these are beautiful wood finishes here and they do draw the attention. All right, with that, let's talk about sound. And to talk about sound, we'll use test gear, or list test gear first. So I already held it up. I used the iBasso DX180, review pending, DAP for this, playing mostly local files off of a micro SD card that were either lossless or high-res FLAC files or DSD files, using either USB Audio Player Pro, the onboard Mango player on the iBasso DAP, or a little bit Roon Arc, even though Roon Arc would have to resample everything to 48 kilohertz sampling rates, just because that's what Roon Arc does on DAPs, and Roon really needs to get that fixed. All right. Desktop gear that I would have tried with it, I used the FIO SR11 streamer as a Roon endpoint. Again, lossless or high-res FLAC files or DSD files, either played locally from my Roon server or streaming the FLAC files via Qobuz, all through Roon. Shit Bifrost 2/64 as a DAC into an Aoun S17 Pro. And I would say that those two chains, the DX180 here and that Bifrost 2 into the Aoun S17 Pro, would have been far and away the signal chains most often used for this headphone, for this review, and where my impressions were formed. I did mention earlier that I used an aftermarket cable a fair amount of the time. The stock cable, again, is okay. I'm not going to reveal the name or the model of that aftermarket cable yet, just because it was a one-off that the maker of this company made for me. It would be around a $80 to $100 piece probably if they were to sell it. I'm working on trying to get them to sell it. I think they should, but it is not for me to name them yet. Okay. With that said, the sound. The perceived frequency response on this headphone, kind of a 1,000-foot view overall, is I think it has what most would consider a U shape to its frequency response. For me, it's mostly U with maybe just a mild little W bump in the mid-range, right? So instead of just a straight U shape where you have an elevated sub bass and an elevated treble, for me there is just the elevated sub bass and the elevated treble for sure, but also this little wiggle maybe in somewhere in the mids that does mess with the mid-range timbre and tonality just a little bit to my ears, but is not to the point where it really gets in the way of my overall enjoyment. So let's unpack all of these things here a little bit. The bass extension on this is pretty good. Okay, I don't know if it's going to dig super deep all the way down there, but like in the low sub bass, that U-shaped signature with the elevated sub bass a little bit does give it a fair amount of sub bass presence and rumble, and it's dynamic enough to give you a healthy amount of slam there in the low end and in the bass as well. Yet it still does it without sounding boomy or splashy. It's got a nice tight thump to it when it hits. It also also has pretty decent bass articulation and detail in the low end with a fair amount of bass texturing as well. Like the finger plucks of bass guitar strings are resolved quite well on a headphone, on this headphone, and at, for a headphone at its price, and really for a headphone at any price, it did a really good job bringing out the subtle little details of the sounds of bass instruments on there. So that was pretty impressive. All right, the treble is elevated in the upper frequencies, as I imagine. That's the other side of the U-shaped curve. And the air frequencies in particular, I think, are boosted slightly above neutral. So in the top end, there is just a little bit of thinness and brittleness to the tonality and the timbre, and it does give like cymbal crashes and like vocals with S's and T sounds and that sort of things, a little bit of sharpness and just a little bit of thinness overall. So that was particularly of note with the stock cable. When I moved to that aftermarket cable, that did smooth out a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind there. I would, if you're going to get an aftermarket cable, I would look into getting an oxygen-free copper, a pure copper conductor cable if you can, to help chill out that air frequency energy just a little bit. All right, in between, that mild little bump that kind of gives this like, kind of a shallow W signature. I think a lot of people kind of perceive it more like this. For me, it's maybe just a little bit like that, right? The tonality through the mids is not awful, but it's not great. And this is also one thing that I noticed, like when I first put the headphone on, took it right out of the box, put it on, I thought the mids were a little bit crunchy and a little bit more forward, and I was like, uh-oh, here we go with another shouty, honky headphone, right? But after a few hours of use here, I did kind of hear that smooth out a bit. Now, it could have been just my brain adjusting because it wasn't all that bad, but I think also, it was just the drivers exercising and loosening up a little bit and frankly breaking in. They smoothed out some. Now, there is just a little bit of a bump still somewhere in the mid-range that gives vocals a little bit of presence. So if you like vocals to stand out a little bit, this gives you a hint of that, but without going as far as some other headphones do, like the Odyssey MM series, the MM100, MM500 as examples, really boost the mids to really get vocals to come and like stand out from the mix. This does that a little bit, but not a lot, and not so much that it tripped my shoutiness and honkiness sensitivity all that often, which is, I mean, I mentioned I really like this headphone, and so that was one reason I was able to like it, is that those mids did not get in the way all of that often. But it's not going to be completely natural or organic timbre just because that tonality, the tonal balance through the mids and then also up in that treble again with the above neutral air frequencies do get in the way from a truly natural sound, but it's not so horrible that for me it was unenjoyable. Okay, because again, I did really enjoy this one. Okay, now other aspects of the sound then, presentational aspects here. The soundstage is neither big nor intimate to my ear. It's just kind of there, kind of what it needs to be. It is a little bit flat in the depth dimension. Not bad, but I have heard better from this price range in terms of being able to do depth and layering in the soundstage, but all of those around this price that are better at it are open back. For a closed back, what this is able to do at the price range in terms of the spatial presentation, laterally and in the depth in particular, the imaging, the separation, the overall three-dimensionality and holography of it are actually fairly impressive for the price there. It's a reasonably dynamic headphone as well. I mentioned this already with the sub bass, it's got some impact to it and will hit fairly hard in the low end. But I think where that slight mid-range bump to my ears comes back into play here with this is like there's also a lot of snappiness on snare drum hits and that sort of thing with this headphone. So it's got a fairly fun dynamic presentation and lively dynamic presentation to it as well. So putting all of that together, more often than not, I actually really did enjoy listening to this headphone. And like the source gear that I mentioned, however, like the DX180 here, the S17 Pro from Aoun. The reason I listen to those two so much, I think, is because I do think this does prefer a slightly warmer source chain. The DX180 has a little bit of warmth to its sound. The Aoun S17 Pro has that stereotypical Class A warmth to it, both in terms of physical temperature, but also to its sound signature, right? And this headphone, I think, took better to that warmer sound. I did try a couple of other more neutral sound signatures to them, and that kind of enhanced my perception of that little bit of mid-range bump to it. And so, like, you know, I just didn't spend a lot of time on those. Like, a little bit of the extra, like, upper bass, lower mid-range energy that comes with a warmer sound signature helps these and smooths out their tonality a little bit. So I think that's something to keep in mind if you're a potential buyer as well, either because you agree with me and want that warmth, or to know that if you want the mids to stand out even more, go with a really neutral signal chain, and you'll get that mid-range like pop out a little bit more if that's what you are looking for. Okay. Now, some comps with other closed-back headphones. I've not heard a ton of closed-backs that are, you know, $650. Others that I have heard that are not, like, ridiculously far away in price would be, like, the Hi-Fi-Man Sundara closed, which isn't great. It's definitely, like, those are definitely more mid-forward, shouty, honky than these are. They are also more difficult to drive, and they are definitely tailored more for, like, at a desk kind of use, not on the go kind of use, where this one is more on the go friendly. Austrian Audio Hi X60 does not have the bass presence that this one has, but I think is a little bit smoother through the mid-range. So it's a little bit more natural in its timbre with vocals and whatnot, but it is not as resolving or as holographic or as dynamically impactful as this headphone is either, and it's certainly not as pretty, right? And then, like, going up in price from there, like, I got my Focal Radiance out to do a comparison with this, and the Radiance, like, was what, $1,200-$1,300 when it was available brand new. I think it's pretty well sold out these days, which is unfortunate. Okay, but stepping up to that one, like, the Radiance had a much more natural tone and timbre to it. It also was more resolving and three-dimensional in its spatial presentation. Like, it was a significant jump up in overall quality over this one there. So, like, this is not going to be a giant slayer by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a good, solid performer there in the middle hundreds or mid to upper $100 kind of price range. As a closeback goes in there. So, but I mean, I want to reiterate, like, this combo in particular, the iBasso DX180, and again, review pending for this, coming out very soon, and the Audio Technica ATH-WP900. I listened to this combo a lot. And not because I had to, because I was reviewing them, but because I wanted to. They sound really good together. And, like, this headphone here, like, it was portable enough that I could put these together here and go walk the dog. You know, all those kinds of things, on the go type usage. I took them to work, used this in my cubicle, used this combo in my cubicle a fair amount and all of that. And just the comfort was good. The sound was fun and engaging, but also realistic enough that I didn't find it to be overall distracting. And I mean, I listen to a lot of hard rock and heavy metal and that sort of thing. And, like, these two together handled that really well, really engaged me, and gave me a really fun, enjoyable listening experience with that genre in there as well. But it also sounds decent with classical, with jazz. You know, it's also good for pop, hip hop, EDM, that sort of thing. But overall, I mean, before I get too rambly here, yeah, I did end up really enjoying the ATH-WP900. I don't know if I get to keep it, but I will not be disappointed if I am able to, and I probably would find some use for it somewhere because I did enjoy listening to it. I recognize that it's not perfect, but its shortcomings for the price and for what it is, I think, is more than reasonable, and it's a good, solid, closed-back option if you're looking for a more fun kind of sound with lots of sub bass in it and all of that. that they're at, in around 600, $600 to $700 and for on-the-go use and all of that. All right, don't forget to check out the sound leak test that I will link to in the description below. But thanks for watching my review of the Audio-Technica ATH-WP900 closed back headphone, $650. Check it out. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. If you have not already, check out my PayPal and my Patreon, and generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels. And as always, enjoy the music.